I'm Sebastien Krier, and I'm a senior technology policy researcher at Stanford University's Cyber Policy Center.
How do projects that utilize AI minimize potential risks?
Minimize, I usually think of that as when you use kind of AI and other emerging tech in situations that are normally dangerous, and you help essentially automate human tasks or behaviors, but in very kind of dangerous areas. So whether exploring a mine, for example, is one of them, or delivering kind of aid or food assistance and so on in war zones. So I think in these types of situations, you're definitely in some way kind of reducing risk, because you're sending in kind of potentially a robot or some form of kind of, but in other ways there's also novel and other risks depending on because of some characteristics that kind of AI technologies have. So like the opacity of some algorithms, for example, or even in terms of how you develop the AI system in and of itself. Frequently you've got startups or kind of teams or academics coming up with a particular application or a use case that seems good, and on paper high accuracy and everything works well, but then when you try to implement that in a kind of very different context, and somewhere like South Lebanon or something, it's all lots of kind of unpredictable risks and elements, and equally it's not as easy to just you need essentially experts on the ground. You need kind of a diverse team of people with field expertise and subject matter expertise to kind of help make these tools actually useful and less risky. But yeah, I think it's the answer is essentially it kind of depends on what kind of use case we're talking about and in what context.
Is AI a better identifier of needs, or is it better at coming up with solutions?
AI can be a very useful technology or set of technologies in terms of kind of like discovering correlations and trends and things that we weren't necessarily aware of before, or it's very kind of useful. DeepMind is full of that, of using kind of AI to make new very interesting kind of discoveries, for example with protein folding and so on. So I think it can definitely be a technology of technologies and kind of help find out things, but in general, I think, at least with the stages most kind of AI systems are at now and the maturity of them, I'd say it's usually kind of, you have a problem to start with, and then you use AI to try to fix that, rather than starting off with using AI to try to find out about problems. But I mean, obviously you can, and depending on the context and how it's done and so on, it's a characteristic or property. But again, it's very difficult sometimes talking about AI like that as a kind of a one-off thing. But yeah, otherwise, yeah, I think in general, it's better to kind of use AI once you've determined there's a problem, check you've got the data sets and everything, and then try to build something around that to fix that particular problem, rather than using AI just for the sake of it. I see it more, I guess, as a solution sometimes. Very often it's you use it kind of a tool to get to a better answer, to automate a certain thing, and to get essentially a better solution or a better product or method in the end. So like an example I'm thinking about, again, in a humanitarian context, is the Immigration Policy Lab at Stanford. They've been kind of working over the last few years on an algorithm to kind of help with refugee integration. So they kind of help match refugee profiles to kind of job requirements in different regions in Switzerland. And so in that sense, it's kind of being used to discover like particular kind of correlations or appropriateness or good matching between a refugee candidate and a region or an opportunity. So I guess in a sense, AI finds things and solutions that it hasn't really, that on a human level would have been much harder to emulate or replicate. So yeah, I guess on this example, you just one that's just better at finding the solution and better matching people to kind of opportunities and so on. So I tend to think of it better, yeah, as a solution rather than as a technology to kind of find problems. Although there's definitely ways you could kind of use AI regressions and so on to like identify things as well.
There's a concern that a growing reliance on technology can infringe on privacy rights. How do we avoid a potential trade-off between the rights to privacy and other rights protected by projects which utilize AI?
Privacy rights, I think, are a concern amongst like other types of issues and values you want to bear in mind in terms of kind of tech policy. So you might have accountability, that's one kind of worth looking at as well and so on. But on privacy specifically, well, there's a few different things. There's already kind of existing privacy legislation. Now, some difficulties here too, like is it kind of up to date? Can it be improved? How do you kind of compare and have ensure that there's kind of cross-border compatibility? But so there's legislative aspect, and then there's also on the technical side, techniques like privacy preserving machine learning kind of techniques to help kind of minimize these risks to privacy. And I think in general, the question is, there's definitely, I think, a need to find some sort of balance between, how you deal and think about privacy and also enabling and ensuring that data and AI can actually be used for healthcare and education and so on. Well, I guess AI can play a role in realizing them as well. I mean, as much as it can play a risk in some respects, it's there's loads of ways AI can be used in education or in healthcare and deliver huge kind of benefits. And I think that's kind of the state's role to try to incentivize or create kind of pull mechanisms or incentivize discoveries and kind of research into these areas proactively. And exactly being transparent means will be very different in a healthcare context that'll be in a policing one or one for pure entertainment or something. And so I think things are being worked out. There's definitely more needed to ensure that we drift away from kind of tech skepticism and kind of embrace it a little bit more because we know that the risks are adequately addressed.
Can we trust AI?
Can we trust AI? I think it's a misleading question. I think it's can we trust the humans that develop the AI and that use the AI and that sell the AI? And I think yes and no. I think once again, I think it'd be too simple to say yes, we can trust AI, or no, we can't trust AI. It's inherently evil, or useless, or something. I think AI can be really great and really bring on lots of kind of social benefits and changes and just innovation and whatnot, including growth. But equally, there'll be loads of kind of misapplication, misuses, reckless uses, and there are kind of particular instances where it's not desirable. Like if you're in a judicial setting and you've got an algorithm that's determining whether you get bail or not, or whether how long you stay in jail or something, you want to kind of understand why the decision was taken, the ramifications, and in that particular setting, for example, one might argue that, well, actually AI is not an appropriate technology in this particular use case because of its because of the fact that it kind of doesn't really allow you to kind of have or benefit from due process and so on. So I think it depends really, but as a whole, I'd say I'm cautiously optimistic about AI, but there's also lots of different risks, both short-term and long-term, I think, that need to be addressed and researched. I think as long as you do a bit of both right, then it's on the net positive, I'd say. And the A-level scandal, calling it a mutant algorithm, it's a particularly bad phrase because it's kind of it kind of just assumes an algorithm can mutate or something, which obviously is not the case. But even if you take it at the second degree, it shifts away responsibility to the algorithm rather than to the ministers or policymakers that kind of allowed it, created it, and rolled it out. And there's been some interesting kind of guidance since then from the Office for AI on essentially ensuring that if you're going to roll out an algorithm like that, you need to ensure essentially that it needs ministerial kind of clear off. And I think that's a good first step. I think the first step into really developing better AI products is to really ensure that there's kind of a human responsible kind of actor behind it, and that the accountability falls on that person, whether it's a politician, a policymaker, or kind of an executive.